Welcome to All Electric Conversations, where we talk with pioneers in traveling with electric vehicles. We're your hosts, Katie and Steve Krivolovic of the All Electric family. From road trips and towing to daily life, we'll hear stories of wanderlust and progress to inspire your own adventures with All Electric Conversations. Today we are here with Bruce, who is another person that we were fortunate enough to meet at the Charged Rally. And we were really interested in his story because his trailer was very unique, which is really awesome. So we can't wait to have him tell us more about that. So Bruce, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and just a little bit about your story.
Well, I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. I've lived here about 35 years now. It's a wonderful place to live, full of interesting thinkers that always keep you a little off balance, so you like to think about things in different ways. Um, I my dad was a very do-it-yourself guy, and he was an airline pilot, and he sort of instilled in me the idea that you shouldn't be afraid of tools. You should be willing to try things. He had a shop when I was a kid, and while I never like cut my hand off in the bandsaw, it was a possibility because he was not going to say you can't use that. You can use that with with permission and supervision. So basically, I pretty much personal just go ahead and try something. And when I was a kid, and I don't know about you guys, when I was a kid, there wasn't Menards, there wasn't Home Depot, there wasn't Lowe's. The availability of all this stuff now is so great that it gives you the opportunity that if you have the space, which is a huge problem, you can make things. And I'm a very big fan of the maker movement. I read Make Magazine every month. Adam Savage is a big. I admire Adam Savage a lot. So people in the travel business, like you guys, people who have RVs are great folks. But I never really wanted to have an RV because it has a lot of side effects that you have to come along with it. Like you have to store the thing, you have to insure the thing. I mean, it's like having another mortgage. That never really appealed to me, but I did like the idea of building stuff. So if you have the internet, and if you're watching this, I'm guessing you probably do, you should probably go check out a site called tnttt.com. That stands for Teardrops and Tiny Travel Trailers.com. And they have about 20 different sections on there of different building techniques, one of which is foamies. And, you know, the name there is not terribly descriptive, but what it does is they're talking about is using this material right here. This is 2-inch construction foam, which you think about as putting in your walls and it keeps your house warm, which it does a fine job of. But the other thing is it was very, very stiff. I mean, I could probably crack this in half if I had to, but it's really, really stiff. And as such, it makes great wall material, and it's also, by the way, insulation. So the basic technique for building a foamy is you get a trailer, and a lot of people go to Harbor Freight and get their 4x8 trailers. If you're making just making a teardrop, you don't need a very big platform. You get their 4x8 Harbor Freight trailer. You put down a plywood floor, which you should waterproof. They have a stuff called the mix that is basically urethane and turpentine mixed together, and you put a whole bunch of coats of that on the floor, so it becomes waterproof. And then you build walls out of foam. It is coated on one side with glue and craft paper, and on the other side with canvas and glue. I used Harbor Freight or Menards painting tarps to put the thing together. It doesn't make the prettiest finish necessarily. It's definitely got a pebble to it, and it's got seams here and there. But the more time you want to put into it, the nicer you can make it look. That said, I've built 2 of these now. One of the sayings on the foamy board on TNTTT is your first one is never your last one. And I thought, oh sure, but they're absolutely right, absolutely right, because you run. And how many RVs have you had? I mean,
Oh yeah.
you find things you want that you don't have, and in my case,
Yeah.
it wasn't a lot. I mean, the thing, you'll see the pictures of my first one. I have sent you pictures of my first and my second one.
Yeah.
The first one was pretty small. I mean, my garage is only 6'6" high, so I can't build a huge one. So I built one that fits in my garage, and it was called what they call a crouchy. You can't stand up in it; you can just crouch in it, which is
Yeah.
better than a teardrop, honestly. Because a lot of people who had teardrops that I talked to would say, "Well, I can't even put my pants on the teardrop because I can't sit up and go like this."
Yep.
And that I never even thought about that when I was building this thing. I was basically worried about the height of my ceiling and how do you put the foam together to make big walls. Um,
Yeah.
Anyway, the first one was good and functional, and I had gotten an aluminum trailer made custom for me by a guy in town here, but he made it out of aluminum angle iron, aluminum angle, 90-degree angle, and it was pretty good. It was very light. It was only like 250 pounds, um, all told. But the problem is that I got a crack in the frame right over the axle, and that
Oh
was
no.
and he tried to fix it once, and it wasn't going to be fixed. He just underbuilt it. So
Hmm.
I took towing a trailer with an RV is kind of unusual, as you guys might know. Several years ago, we have electric car shows every year here in Madison, where they have them everywhere now, but we were way ahead of the curve. And
Yeah.
I offered to take Campy behind my Model X to the show, and everybody was like, "You can do that?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you really can. You have to make trade-offs here and there." And now, obviously, you guys have totally ignored the trade-offs. Congratulations. Um,
Yes, we have.
but anyway, where I was going, where rambled away from here was the things that were missing in the first version was the ability to stand up, and also
Yeah.
a bathroom.
Yes.
My wife and I are, I've crested 60. My wife is not far away, and people realize that you generally might have to go to the bathroom middle of the night. And
Hmm.
campgrounds are lovely places, but you don't want to be winding around to go to the bathroom at 2 in the morning. It's just not that much fun.
No.
So Campy version 2. By the way, the I should probably mention the camper's name is Campy McCampface.
I
After
like
I
it.
love it.
after Bodie McBoatface. Version 2, Campy 2, had to be larger, had to be taller. It had to be use the entire length of the frame that I had built for it. Frame number 2 was actually a little bit longer, and I had the guy put a shelf on the back of it, which in retrospect was just useless. And I ended up building the camper longer to cover the back end of the frame. And also all the way, I extended it out to the very front of the tongue. And the front section, the little triangle section there, makes a good place to park a cassette toilet, which is something I
Yeah.
will do this summer. I have not done it yet, but I will do it this summer. Um, the building is. People say, "Do you have plans?" And I said, "No, I never had plans." I mean, you buy the foam, you go to Menards, you buy 6 or 7 sheets of foam, and you lay out your floor plan, and you think about what you're doing. But I almost never drew a line on a piece of paper, which is not the smartest way to play this game, but it works. It's okay.
Depends how you work.
Well, I mean, honestly, I can follow plans. I just don't draw them. So anyway, I decided we had to get bigger, and my mother-in-law, luckily enough, had built a. She lives north of here in Fond du Lac, and she had built a garage that it was bigger than mine, that I could build the thing taller. I can't now. Campy
Oh,
2
nice.
can't get into my garage, which is kind of a problem in the summer times.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went. I took my old Campy, and I should send you the video of me cutting it apart, because it exists. I have a high
Mhm.
speed video of me cutting it apart.
Yeah.
Um,
You should
I
send
will
that over.
I will I will dig that out someplace. I took it up to Fond du Lac. I put it in the garage. I stared at it for a long, long time, thinking, "Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this?" And finally, I said, "Okay, let's do it." I took all the windows and doors and hatches out, because I'm going to reuse them. All recycled stuff. Took out the air conditioner, which was a design of mine that was pitifully terrible. Didn't work very well at all. And then I got my Sawzall, slapped a battery on it, went, and literally in 20 minutes I had taken the thing down to the frame. Now that sounds like, when I say that, it sounds like, wow, that's pretty weak stuff. It can't be very strong. Foamies, when they're glued together and they have a lining on the inside and canvas on the outside, are a very monocoque frame, and they're very, very stiff. I've seen video, although I've never been brave enough to do it myself, of people taking cinder blocks and throwing them at them and then just bounce off with a dent. Um,
Nice.
and for something that I have very little money invested in, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I was trying to go for with the new version of Campy was more aerodynamics, and
Mhm.
I think I failed miserably. But as you guys demonstrate with your towing videos all the time, I mean, I'm a Model X with a 100 kilowatt hour battery. I can probably I think it could safely go 125 miles at highway speeds.
Yeah.
Well, in a Tesla, it's good. For you guys, when you're looking for CCS chargers, that's not so good yet. But on the other hand, I figure in 2
Yeah.
years that'll be fixed. There'll be so many EVs out there that'll be fixed.
I think so.
So
So
anyway, I'm in the
I'm
garage. Yeah,
yeah.
go
So
ahead.
I imagine like through your looking at this website, you found certain designs that you liked or certain
Oh
things
yeah.
that you like, and so I would imagine you came up with something from there. Would you say that,
Um, Not really.
or
I
you
mean,
just went for it?
the
It's
first,
like how much will it fit in my garage?
well, that was literally the defining factor. I didn't want to go anywhere to build this thing, and I only had the garage that I had. I wasn't going to dig the floor of the garage lower to make it taller, although I've seen people do that.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really the defining factor was what I had to work
Okay.
with, and I tell people this about the Model X all the time. People say, "Wow, what cool back doors!" And I will say they are the dumbest things ever bolted to a car. Why? Well, my garage is 6'6", and I can't open them in my garage. And I get why they did it in the first place. I get that had kids and all this stuff, and he wanted to be able to get in and out and do the car seat thing. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of hardware and a lot of electronics and a lot of stuff that could easily
Yeah.
go wrong just to replace 4 hinges. You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to Cappy. I'm up in Fond du Lac. I chopped the thing down to the frame. I cut the frame off. I cut the plywood off the frame. One mistake I had made in camping number one was that I only used like half-inch ply for the floor. It was a little spongy. So I used
Hmm.
3/4 inch ply this time around, and I spent a couple of weeks. I laid it out. I figured out what the taper was supposed to be at the front. Then I took it all off and I painted it with the mix. I put 2 or 3 or 4 coats of the mix on there to waterproof it. I hope it works well. It haven't had, I've had, have, to be fair, I never had any problem with rot on the first one, and I don't think I'll have any problem with this one. Then I started putting walls. I would take a piece of foam and put it up and look at it for a while, and put it over here and look at it for a while. I also put a taper on the back. You know the trailer tails you see on trailers? Those are there for a
Yeah.
reason, because one of the things that really ruins your gas mileage or or increases your electrical usage on a car is the fact that behind a flat space on a trailer, there's a huge vacuum bubble that really pulls you back intensely. And then the reason they have trailer tails is because it makes more of a taper and makes the air go like this, as opposed to just yanking on you. I tapered the back of mine, and I stared at that for a very, very long time. So it has a sideways taper and it has a top taper. And this is where not doing plans tends to bite you in the ass, because I got this thing all put together, but I didn't really measure the angles, because when you think about it, the roof angle it's very precise in here, and I was just winging it. I mean, and here's one thing that you'll learn if you try this out is that trying to run a 4x8 sheet of foam through a table saw by yourself is an astonishing wrestling match. And foam binds up a saw like you wouldn't believe. I mean, you think this stuff is just soft, and it is until it decides it's not. So anyway, the worst part about the whole thing is that the back angle on my roof was not precise. I figured I'll just fill it up with foam and glue it over. It leaked pretty badly, so I ended up actually redoing it. That said, I put the thing together piece by piece. I built the front part, I built the side walls, I built the back walls, and the roof, because this one is wider than the original Campy, it actually has an 8x8 roof span that I put oak stringers inside to make it stiff, and it really was not nearly enough. I think 8 feet is probably farther than you should stretch this stuff. That said, myself and a friend could pick it up and put it on top of the camper and put the glue on and stick. That's the other thing, is that the primary functional tools for building a foamie are obviously the foam. Two different kinds of glues. One is Tight Bond 3, which is using for put fabric on it, and the other is Gorilla Glue, which if you want to put foam on wood, there's nothing better. And
Yeah.
and the other thing is that you squirt a little water on it, it gets foamy and fills in gaps, which is kind of nice. So yeah, we glued all this stuff together, stared at it for a while, and because, by the way, the roof was so large, I had to actually cover it with a canvas before I put it on, which made for another interesting wrestling match. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. I know this is going to get old, but I'll tell you the one big mistake I made was that when I put my frame up on the jacks so it wouldn't roll around, I took the wheels off and I measured around the wheels. Unlike the first Campy where the wheels are outside and had fenders, this one has the wheels inside, and I totally underestimated the size of the space I would need for the wheels to ride in there when the suspension goes like this. And I had really shorted the front edge of the thing. And as I said before, I'm in television production, and one of the jobs I have these days is doing video screens for a symphony orchestra in Madison that does concerts on the square at the state capitol 6 weeks a year. And when I go to bring the finished, they're never finished. Finished Campy down to Madison so I can do these shows out of it, because it's also not just a camper, it's also a television control truck. I'm driving down the highway and I'm hearing zip, 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 zip. I know this can't be good. And I realized after a while that it was the tires catching on the front edge of the wheel well area. And I spent a long time underneath Campy with a sawzall chopping away at parts of it to make the wheel fit better. So, hey kids, measure things. That said, it's, as you guys saw, it's basically a tent you don't have to pitch or tear down when it's wet. It's pretty functional. We have a TV set in there. We have a air conditioner. I'm gonna eventually have a convection microwave. Eventually, it'll be a cassette toilet. But it's basically two beds that are laid out in this configuration, I guess, and it's room for me and my wife, and the dogs can sleep on the floor if you can keep them on the floor. And like it's more of an aspirational camper than it is actually a camper, because with Campy One, I built it because I wanted to go out and go camping, but life just gets in the middle of it. And the farthest I ever towed it was to Missouri to see the solar eclipse. Was what 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
The frame had not cracked by then, I don't think, but we got back. With the advent of electric cars, I always told myself that my retirement was going to be getting a trailer, hooking it up to the thing, driving from supercharger to campground, charging at the campground, driving the next supercharger to the next campground. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of time. It was probably 9 years when I thought about that, and I haven't retired yet. So, although January 1st is my retirement date, theoretically.
Congrats.
We're shooting. Haven't gotten there yet. Plenty of things can go sideways between here and there. Anyway, that was a long way to say, if you feel like you have any DIY in you at all and you can buy things off eBay, I highly recommend building your own camper. If you don't need an Airstream, if all you want is the tent you don't have to pitch, it's an absolutely doable concept, and tnttt.com is the place to start. And I have no financial interest in that. It's just where I happened to stumble on the information that I needed.
Yeah. And it seems like it's really forgiving. So once you do start, if you do make mistakes, that you can work your way around them and fix them.
That is the word. That is the word I forgot to say. Foam is the most forgiving building medium, because on Campy One, I cut the back window holes too big, so I just took the part I cut out, glued it back in there, and then cut it back again, the proper contour. It's a building material that sort of encourages you just to sit and stare at it for a while and say, would that work? I don't know. I may complain about it, but it appeals to me, the idea that, and it's not just me. Almost anybody could do this if you have the space. The space is a big deal. But if you're relatively patient, if you're not in a hurry, one of the reasons why I brought Campy down here, Campy 2 down here last summer, was because I actually was up against a deadline. I had to be ready for the concerts on the square. And it wasn't, I didn't have an interior in it by then. It's funny because people would come by and want to see me directing the show, and they'd be saying, what is this thing? Because there wasn't any wall finish in it or anything. It was just, in the ceiling, I used stick-on ceiling tiles you get on Amazon, which I highly recommend, for the roof and the top of the walls. And it was like the roof was like a third done, and it's like, about as janky
Yeah.
as you can get. But now that we've gotten that much finished, by the way, the other miracle building material is 2x2 pine boards. You can build frames out of that so easily. Half of Campy is 2x2s, and the other half is foam, basically. So yeah, if you have the space and you have the desire, it's absolutely doable. And honestly, I think I paid $3,000 for the frame, and I have a suspension is actually, it doesn't have an axle. Both wheels are on separate suspensions, which helps with the ground clearance. Although even at this point, it doesn't have much ground clearance. I built it that way on purpose because I didn't understand why people would want to climb a ladder to get into their RVs.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer to
Yeah.
that? I don't quite get it.
No.
And also, I thought it would help with the aerodynamics of keeping it behind a
Yeah.
Tesla. The people on the various RV and Tesla boards call me a fool because well, you got to keep it below the roof line. And it's like makes for a very short camper.
It does.
Um,
Yeah.
It does.
a lot of people are into the whole high-low thing where the roof can go up and down like this, and that's awfully mechanical and would take a lot more design than I was willing to put into it. The
Yeah, that
door,
would be a lot.
the door in particular
Yeah.
is an issue. That said, like I say, I have maybe 5,000-6,000 bucks in this. I bought all my windows and my door off eBay. I bought a air conditioner at Best Buy, I think, or no, Costco, and just lucky enough that the air conditioner fits through the port that I already had by
Nice.
this much. And I mean, basically, all the rest of the parts are from Ace Hardware and Menards, and you got to be willing to experiment. You got to be willing to take a flyer every now and again, but the rewards are great. And while it's not a lovely Airstream like yours, I do envy that in some ways. I I don't have $1 jillion invested in it, but by the same token, I
Yeah.
don't have to haul around 4 kids.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I was surprised when I walked in how roomy it was and how much space you guys did have in there. I remember, looking at it and thinking it was going to be more like a teardrop type,
Yeah.
just a taller teardrop. And then, you walk in, you're like, oh wow, there's plenty of space in here. So it
Yeah,
was, and you have the pride in that you put it together and
Yeah.
all that stuff too, which we just
that cuts
went
both
and found
ways.
one. Yeah.
That cuts both ways.
True.
I
True.
mean, honestly, I look at some of the commercial campers out there and really scratch my head, like the tabs, which are really overinflated teardrops, and it's like, why do you have the taper down like this when you lose all of that space back there? On the other hand, it's more aerodynamic. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but the idea of just cutting off the back like this, they don't even have a kitchen back there, which is what you do with a normal teardrop.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't quite go there. And the other thing is, I want to be able to haul my bikes behind the thing. So the idea of putting a bike rack behind this is just kind of senseless. And once again, it would take a
Yeah.
fairly good aerodynamic situation and turn as bad as it could possibly be. It's like towing a
Yeah.
parachute.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to build their own teardrop or camper, what advice would you give them outside of going to this website and cruising that for a while? Is there one thing that you learned that you wished you would have known before?
Um, Not really. I mean, if you have the desire and it's not a question of ability in this case, because once again, as you pointed out, Katie, this is totally foam is totally forgiving. You can screw it up 6 ways to Sunday, and you can just worst case scenario, you chop it out and you put a new piece of foam in there. And this stuff is not as cheap as it used to be. When I built the first one, I think this a 4x8 of 2 inch was $13. Now it's closer to 30. But still,
Yeah.
that's not that expensive. And it's not, honestly, to be fair, it's not the only way to build something like this. Foamies are great, but you can buy stress skin wall panels that are this thick that'll do roughly the same job. They're much more expensive.
Okay.
I've seen people I've seen honeycomb panels that are super light that are very expensive. But if weight is your biggest thing, um, that's something to look into. But on the other hand, if weight is your biggest thing, foam is the way to go. And as I've learned the hard way, towing an RV is not about weight. Even with the Tesla, it's not about weight. It's about aerodynamics. It's all about
Hmm.
aerodynamics. And
It is.
so that's one thing. If you want to do this with an EV, think about your aerodynamics. Don't build a flat front box. Don't, if you can help it, don't build a flat back box, because you're gonna suffer. I mean, in the Tesla world, people say, "Well, you can't pull a trailer into a supercharger," and it's like, yeah, you're right, you can't. Now, you guys have seen that. How many times have you unhooked your Airstream? Um,
Yep.
and there are designs out there that I've seen for new supercharger setups where they have supercharger posts in the middle of a parking lot, and as an attempt to help the trailer people. By the same token, when you pull up to that thing, your trailer is still sticking out there 45 feet.
Yeah.
We're at the very, very front edge of this thing. Well, I take that back. We're at the
Yeah.
very front edge. We're in the middle of the front edge, and things. I'll tell you, I've been driving electric cars since 2012. We've been 100% electric in our house for almost 5 years now, with
That's awesome.
a
Yeah.
Bolt and a Model X. I've seen more change since COVID than I did in the previous 9 years.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I think people realize that here's a chance to experiment where everybody's basically sitting back and seeing what happens next. There are still plenty of haters out there. I'm sure you probably figured that out.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is, people change, and I said a million times to people about many different subjects. You don't change people; you change people's kids. My kids have never.
Yeah.
My kids have almost never driven. Well, I take it back; they're driving Priuses, but they took their driver's test in a Leaf
Hmm.
8 years ago. I think one of my daughters said this is the first time that the driving test person had ever seen an electric car, and and they were like, "This really exists." Well, thank you,
Yeah.
That's
Nissan.
awesome.
I wish Nissan had
Yeah.
kept up the pace, but there are plenty
Yeah.
of other options now.
There are.
By the way, one of the reasons why I have a Model X is that when I plan to retire and wander around the world, the Model X at the time was the only car you could get, only electric car you could get with a trailer hitch. That
Yeah.
is now quite changed.
Yes.
And as far as EVs in general are concerned, I tell people that they're not for everybody quite yet. But the two determining factors are A, if you can afford it, and two, if you have a garage. If you don't have a
Yeah.
garage, it's tougher.
It is.
If you have a place to plug it in at night, you're absolutely golden. I was in Minneapolis a while back, and driving out of town, I saw actually a EV charger on the side of the road in the city with four plugs stretched out over four parking spots. And it's like, how hard is this? I mean, no
Yeah.
new technology needs to be invented to run a conduit underneath a sidewalk. You just have to have the will, and
Yeah.
it's getting there. Um,
It is.
I am rambling yet again. Where do we start here? Should you do it?
That's right.
Absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Your resources are TNTTT and eBay, and there are plenty of places in well, they build all the RVs in America in South Bend, Indiana, and that neighborhood in Michigan, just north of there. There are places there you can go by where they have surplus stores basically for RV parts where you can go get stuff, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Huh.
And don't be afraid to try things. And one of the problems with this foam, by the way, this foam, is that it happens to be 2 inches wide, which makes it very stiff and very stable. But it also the windows and the doors you buy are not designed for 2 inch walls. You have to
Oh
figure out
yeah.
some way to bridge that gap, which is basically long bolts and wooden reinforcement and stuff like that. But once you figure it out, you'll say, "Duh." Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say this: in the miles that I've towed my two campies, nothing has ever fallen
Hmm.
off of them. So I'm calling that
There
a
you
win.
That's a
go.
plus. I
It
have.
does.
So have you? How did you determine your uh, trailer, like underneath, like you said you don't have an axle, and
I
so
don't have
how
an
did you
axle.
determine that?
Uh, the
What
internet,
trailer to get?
basically. Well,
Okay.
like I said, the first one I had was custom built, and I knew I wanted to be wider than 4 feet because my wife and I went and looked at a bunch of teardrops um, before we got into this, and we both basically realized that we like each other just fine, but that's a tiny little space, and
Yeah.
we want a little more stretch out room. Um,
And you have dogs, right?
well, we have two dogs, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a consideration, definitely. Um, yeah, I specifically had to have a larger trailer than just a 4x8. I'll tell you, I keep telling people to go buy the Harbor Freight 4x8 trailers. That's not the only place to go. They've got some issues with tires and stuff and some bearings. So I wouldn't necessarily go there absolutely first. So anyway, I found a guy in town here who was a welder, and I said, "Here's what I want." He said, "No problem." And I think I paid $1,200 for the first one, and I bought the suspension myself. Actually, I went to it's a Timbren, and they're out of Canada. They make all sorts of different suspensions, and I just liked the fact that it was low to the ground because once again I thought that it was going to be the aerodynamic,
Yeah.
the key to the whole thing. If you'll see a picture, I have a picture of the first one that I sent you, where it has a flat face but it's tapered this way, and I thought that's going to be the fix, and I was absolutely wrong about that. I mean, people will tell you. I mean, since I've been complaining about this on the Facebook camper boards and the Tesla boards, people are like, you didn't put nice soft curves in it, and honestly, I know a guy who built a Airstream out of foam using the Airstream
Wow.
profile, but it was a ton of work,
Oh
tons
yeah.
and
Oh,
tons of
sure.
work. I mean, there are ways to curve this stuff where you can actually make any curve you want, but it's a ton of work. And as far as Campy 2 was concerned, while I wanted it to be better, I still had a deadline.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that a lot of people get stuck into, and you see they call them backyard builds, where people work on it for 2 years and then they just stuff it in the backyard because they're tired of it. Um,
Sure.
having too
Sounds
many,
like
too
me.
many. Well, really, tell me all about it. Having a vision and not wanting the Mona Lisa is probably important. I mean, you just don't want to. I love your Airstream. I don't want an Airstream. I
Yeah.
want a functional tent that is warm and we when we took it down to the charged rally, we brought along a little heater for this thing, and it was
Yeah.
cold. It was cold those days, but we had this thing barely cracked on, and we were hotter than hell in there because the thing is made of
Yeah.
insulation. It's not only
Yeah.
Yeah.
insulation this direction; it's insulation this
Yeah.
direction too.
Yeah.
It holds heat in really, really well.
That's true.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
it
once
got down
again,
into the teens, I think, and
something
at
like that.
night when we were
It
down there.
was
Yeah.
cool.
All
Yeah.
you Southerners walking around in puffy jackets was pretty fun to watch. Um,
Was.
Yeah.
we're wearing shorts. No, the wind was the tough part. It was the cold
Yeah,
Yes.
wasn't so
that's
bad.
right.
The wind was
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
We were talking about
uh,
the trailer. So
oh yeah.
I just was. So if you get one with an axle, I'm assuming
Mhm.
that's where you, like if a person, I'm thinking through this, I don't know if this is 100% true, but if you get one with an axle, I'm assuming that can have more weight on it. So you're looking to do more stuff. Is that accurate?
Actually, in my situation, the limiting factor is the tires. My tires are really kind
Okay.
of small. They're like little donuts rolling around.
Okay.
And somebody pointed out that they have weight limits. And I looked on the thing, and they're rated for 1,500 pounds and 60 miles an hour.
Okay.
In my situation, that's pretty much perfect because I don't. I took Campy 2 to a scale and put it on there, and it told me it weighed 1,750 pounds, but I know it doesn't because you know how the scales are all in different sections, and I was parked only on the front section, on the back, in the middle section, and the front section said 250, and the middle section said 1,500. So obviously the thing weighs about 1,500 pounds. Now
Yeah.
the other thing I don't have on there is brakes, and I don't particularly worry about that so much with the Tesla because the regen is so good, the regenerative braking is
Hmm.
so good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go much higher than that without brakes. But once again, it's not like it used to be when my dad was towing a fifth wheel where you had the brake controller under the dashboard and
Yeah.
you tap it with your finger. Now it's all can be all built into the brakes, into the
Yeah.
trailer itself. Once again, a limiting factor, a hurdle I didn't want to jump. And I don't feel bad about it right now. I've never blown a tire. I have a spare, but I've never blown a tire. Let's keep it that way.
Yes. Yeah.
And then how do you handle your electrical currently?
You mean in terms of camping?
Yeah, so you say you had air conditioner. I'm assuming that doesn't run
It's
off.
120 volts. I mean, I should have brought it in here and showed it to you. I have an Anchor power pack. If the
Okay.
entire electrical, and on the previous Campy, I actually had a Goal Zero power pack. There was a lead acid battery with another one hooked to it. I mean, honestly, I see people do beautiful work on TNTTT with their electrical systems. It's like they glisten. They're so beautifully designed, and there's fuses everywhere, and that's great and all. I bought the Goal Zero for Campy One, and I bought the Anchor Power Pack for Two, which has all that stuff built in. I have two electrical plugs on the outside. One for when we're doing television, and one is for my TV gear, and one is for the audio guy. Um, so I just take the input from that. I plug it right into I take it back. I have a split so that one side can go straight to the air conditioner, and the other side goes to the Anchor because the Anchor could not give it 120 volts enough to run the air conditioner for very long.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I leave all of the hard stuff to the Anchor itself because
I see.
I while I can do electrical, I don't really want to go any farther than I have to. I want to keep it simple. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and once again, my install of the air conditioner in Campy One, part of the problem was the fact that I had to run an electrical outlet all the way over there, and
Yeah.
it was just not pretty.
Yeah.
And it didn't catch fire, but it was a lot of work, and we never got a lot of use out of it.
Okay.
So what kind of adventures have you been on? Where have the campies been? What's been kind of your
Well,
favorite place you've been able to take it?
basically, as I said, we are aspirational campers. We really want to go. We just don't get around to it. The
Yeah.
Missouri is the farthest we ever took Campy One.
Okay.
And it's funny because we got the two stories that are there is that we got the last spot in this campground, which was like a sand pit. And I thought, oh God, we're never getting out of here. Somehow we did. The other thing is when the came time for the solar eclipse, it was beautiful, clear day that clouded over 5 minutes before the eclipse. And
Oh no.
then 20 minutes afterwards, the clouds went away. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That's the farthest we ever gone. I mean, I've hauled it around Wisconsin a little bit. We have campgrounds all
Hmm.
around Madison. We did some test camping in it with. But once again, it's more of a question of time than desire.
Yeah.
Aspirational camping. I think I just coined a phrase.
Yeah.
Um,
It's true.
uh, but
Yes.
my plan, I have all sorts of plans. Like I said, when superchargers were much rarer than they were, for example, when there were none in North Dakota,
Hmm.
it was much of more of an adventure of find a campground that you can plug into. And honestly,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I've been reading a little bit lately, especially with KOA, people saying, "Well, you can't plug your car into here. That's going to overload our electricals." That's going to change things.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see whether it makes a delineation between campgrounds, the ones that are EV friendly and the ones that are not EV
Yeah.
friendly. I hope we
Yeah.
don't have to
In
play that game.
KOA. I know. I hope we don't either. And the KOA in Ogallala is the place that said
Yeah,
that
and we
we
didn't.
couldn't.
It said on their website that you can charge your car there, but the chargers are all broken. So I just wonder if they're inundated with a bunch of people wanting to charge. And so if you actually bought a campsite there, would they let you? We didn't look into
No,
that.
we didn't
So
get further, but it was.
I but yeah, you're right. There, if campgrounds choose to do that, which seems a bit silly, the right thing to do, I think, is just charge them for the extra power, or charge everybody for whatever power that they
Well,
use. So
that's a
I
slippery
think it.
slope right there, though. I mean, you end up charging people $1 for a kilowatt. I mean, that's a kilowatt hour. That would be bad. I have a friend in town here who is an electrical engineer,
Well,
and
yeah,
and
they do
and
that.
well, when these things become really common, people are going to start pulling this stuff. That's where the free market will come into play. A friend of mine in town here is an electrical engineer, and he also is an EV guy. He had actually had the first Leaf in Wisconsin. He is of a mind that, and it's funny because you think about the charge rally, all of us are plugged into their pedestals all at the same time.
Hmm. Yep.
Now, on the other hand, it was a huge campground with about 12 people there,
Yeah.
and no working showers, by the way. I want to point that out.
Yes, they had shut them down. I think the day that
Yes,
we rolled in.
see, this is where having a tiny little camper is a downside. So anyway,
Yeah.
the point is that he makes the point that RVs in general do not have a full time 80% load like like charging a car. And if everybody was doing that, you could easily overload their system. I get that. But by the same token, I don't think in the future, when this is more common, people are going to be able to tell people you just cannot do that here. I mean, I don't know. Not being an
That's a
electrical
theory.
engineer,
I mean, that's what electrical engineers think about, you know. So, like, I get that in theory, but I mean, are you charging 100% of the time you're at the campground? That's my
well,
question mark to that.
if you have enough cars, just the rotational of this guy's full, this guy's full.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
every
it could be
campsite
quite
is
a load
not
over
going to
time.
be charging.
Oh,
So,
I hope so.
and
I hope, yeah.
yeah, we charge for what, 6 hours, and then we're done. We
Yeah.
don't charge for the rest of the weekend until we have to leave. You know,
Uh,
like
that
it's
that is a very logical position. You have to explain to the owner of the place who's just scared all the time that they're going to have to pay for an
Well, no, I
electrician.
was going
Yeah.
back to your electrical engineer.
Yeah.
They always think about the extremes, and so they should
Yeah.
be thinking about the extremes of the Class
So
A's, if you ask
you
me. But
if you want to learn about why people think about extremes, though, you should be hanging on the Chevy Bolt board that I'm on Facebook, where everybody's like, "Hey, well, we'll just plug it in right here," and then somebody says, "Well, no, you really won't." I mean, I've got a 20 amp breaker in my box. Is that good enough? Not really. Anyway, we're getting a little far afield here.
Right.
I could talk about EVs for the rest of my life because
me too.
honestly, in our lives, in the times of us, I saw something the other day that the year we're living in now is as far away from 1970 as 1920 was, or something like that. That's pretty amazing when you think of the progress between 1970 and now. Assuming
Yeah.
I've always said that technology will save us if we only let it. And there are a whole bunch of people out there who just don't want this, and I don't know how you help those people. Although many of them will die off soon. Um, a
Yeah.
little cynical there, hey. Um,
Right.
but no, the future has all the opportunity to be better if we just manage not to blow ourselves up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's incredible how far it has come, and I mean even in the since we have gotten the Rivian, which was in May, so it hasn't even been a year yet, watching the number of EVs at the charging stations just, I mean, explode over the course of that time. When we first got the Rivian, we'd pull up to an EA station and we were the only truck that was there, the only car that was there. And then now, you pull up and there's a Rivian and a Lightning and you're pulling up, and it's just crazy how just in such a short period of time it's even taken off. So
One
it's
of the great
pretty
advantages we have in Madison is that our utility, Madison Gas and Electric, is a very, very small utility, but they are very progressive and they are willing to go stick their foot in it and do testing and try things out. One of the reasons why I thought it was worthwhile buying a Bolt when I did was the fact that in 2012, when we got the Bolt, there were already about 30 level 2 chargers scattered around Madison that MG&E had put up. Um, they have a bunch
yeah.
of they have some L3 charge points around. But the thing they did recently was right downtown in Madison. They put a EV charging station in there, which has 8 Tesla chargers over here and 7 CCSs over here. And the CCSs, unfortunately, because of parts problems, were didn't get they were installed 1 year and it took a year to get the parts to make them turn on. But within the last
Oh
two
my
months, they've
gosh.
turned it on and they are super popular. I was there the other day charging the Tesla, and there were 4 Teslas and 4 or 5 CCSs in there at the same time. Now, Madison's a pretty progressive place, and honestly, I jokingly say that the Model Y is going to be the car of Madison before the end of the year,
Yeah.
especially with the recent price cuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gonna ripple out across the country from the places that want to accept it to the places that are a little less enlightened. Is that a fair thing to
Yes.
say?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
that's a little bit of a value judgment. Um, but yeah, we have a utility that's very helpful. We have the utility next door, which is Iowa and other parts of Wisconsin, is not in the same boat, sadly. But somebody's got to go first. I said that about the Leaf way back when. People say, why do you want a car that only goes 80 miles? Somebody's got to go first. And
Yeah.
this is
Yep.
Yeah.
and I tell people, the
That's
other
what
thing
we
that I tell
say.
people is that, except for when I rent a car or a truck to go someplace, I haven't bought a drop of gasoline in over 5 years,
Yeah.
which is a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing to go to the gas station at all.
Oh,
So,
I get Rice Krispie bars and Coke. That's about it. Coca-Cola.
yeah, there you go. So, I mean, it's probably just a silly question to even ask, but I mean, in your, having an EV and even towing a camper, have you run into any issues with charging with the Tesla? Have you had any issues
Well,
with that or any adventures there?
it's funny. I totally blocked this out of my mind, and you reminded me of this now. One of the farther places we've gone with Campy, it was Campy One, was the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Oh yeah.
And for a very long time, there were no superchargers in that neighborhood. So I'd rely on
I
plug
bet.
share and stuff like this. And the story goes, I drove, took Campy to the supercharger in Green Bay. Where we were going was a straight shot north. So I spent the time it took to fill the battery to 100%, hooked it up, and I saw that in a town about 60 miles north called Crivets, there was a Chevy dealer that had a level 2 charger. And I figured, what the hell? Let's go put a little more in there. The thing might have had 3 kilowatts in it, maybe. I pull in there, park in, say, hey, dude, can I plug in here for about an hour? Does it get a little more juice? And they say, oh, yeah, sure, why not? Now, oddly enough, so I plug the thing in. The car's just sitting there. It's not running the air conditioning or anything. It's just sitting there. Oddly enough, that was the first time I ever sat in a Bolt, and I ended up buying a Bolt after that. By the way, if you want to buy an inexpensive electric car, the Bolt's pretty good.
Yeah.
So anyway, we kill an hour, and I come back, and the Tesla actually has less electricity than it is when it started. Their
Oh my
charger was
gosh.
just not having it. But what was your choice? I mean, that was the only L2 within 100 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had to get to the campground. So we started going north, and we're doing like 50. It's a 2-lane road for starters, and people in Wisconsin love passing on 2-lane roads. I do not get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we finally get to Michigan. We get to the campsite, which is almost up on the North Shore, and I mean, I'm getting there with like 5% left in the battery, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what are we gonna do? I mean, where do you find a tow truck that can handle a Tesla up here for starters? And then what do you do with the camera? We literally limped in. I think I got to the campsite with 4 or 3%. That was as we say in the business, sphincterific.
Yeah.
Um,
Sounds perfect.
yeah. So yeah, but now they have 3 superchargers and soon several more in the Oop,
Oh
and
wow.
we're going up there to go skiing pretty soon.
Oh nice.
The it's all about the long vision. I mean, you got to things were really tough in 2012. Just
Mhm.
charging locally was tough in
Yeah.
2012. Now it's 11 years later. Superchargers are popping up like mushrooms, and I never expected that at all. I mean, it's funny that I remember there's a shopping center up about 5 miles from here that has a Hy-Vee in it, and Hy-Vee and Tesla have a relationship. There's no two ways around that
I
because
do.
we have 2 Hy-Vees in Madison now that both have superchargers. But anyway, this is before any of that happened. I had to go to. They also have a bike store there where I had to get something for my bike, and I go over to park at the bike shop, and I look over here, and there's a bunch of guys installing superchargers, and I almost drove into a wall looking at this thing. I was like, seriously? In Madison now we have 5 supercharger installations in Madison alone, and now
Wow.
we're getting actually in Verona, which is right next door. We're getting another one this spring. Um, I didn't have that vision where I thought that Tesla would, just jump out to make this happen. But I think a lot of it has to do with the commercial side of the business too, where grocery stores in particular and realize that having somebody be in the building for an hour is actually a pretty good deal. So
It is. Yeah.
and totally aside from the travel aspect of it, yeah, I mean progress is it's getting past the point where it's incremental. Actually, every time you turn around, you see something happen, which is
Yeah.
nice. And honestly, I have to tell you, I really envy your Rivian. I like my Model X just fine, but there's a bunch of downsides to it. And if I could find a Rivian, might actually buy one because also the Ford F-150 is an astonishing truck. Wouldn't
Yeah.
fit in my garage, but it's an astonishing truck.
Yes.
Um, And it also, by the way, has the vehicle to grid stuff that every car should have. Or at least
Yeah.
be able, not to grid per se, but to save you. As I call my bolt, I have a harness on my bolt that allows me to hook an inverter to it to power parts of my house in a blackout, which
Oh,
happened
nice.
last spring actually. But the F-150 is a built-in electricity lifeboat. All you have to do is make sure it's full.
Yeah.
Once again, rambling.
Most of the vehicle should. Yeah.
Yeah. They're both
So
they're both fantastic, and we love both of them, and I
Yeah.
think they're both important for the movement to move forward and all
In
that
different
as well.
ways, Yeah.
Yeah, but we're hitting the end of our time, so
Yeah.
but we really appreciate you sharing your story and all about the foamie. Like I said, when we saw it at the Charge Rally, I was super impressed. Number one, that you had built it all by yourself,
Yeah.
and number two, by the space and all of it that had gone into it. So
are you telling me you don't have tools at your house? Come on, you could do this.
we have tools, but I can only imagine the helping hands coming into. Oh,
Yeah.
mom, I want to
Well,
put that on.
Well, to be fair, my daughters are older than your kids considerably, but
Yeah.
when they were younger, they were very much in the business of what's Dad up to, and I have a
Yes.
sailboat that my younger daughter and I refiberglassed all by ourselves, and
Oh my
that was
gosh.
my older daughter surprises me constantly. She's a geologist. I'm in my shop about a year ago, and I'm just looking at these two boxes on my bench. She's going, "What is that?" And she goes, "Oh, that's a rosin-based 3D printer."
Nice.
I'm telling you,
Nice.
this thing is cool. And
Oh yeah.
my daughters are both into anime and cosplay, and holy cow, the stuff they come up with is astounding. And so
That's
Bet.
awesome.
it helps. In your case, you got these kids. I mean, it helps to nurture their imaginations
It
in all
does.
sorts of different ways.
It
And
does.
why take the easy path? Why
Yeah.
Oh,
just
yeah.
buy everything?
We don't know.
Oh my God, I'm getting
Yeah.
philosophical. That's a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, and
Thanks, Bruce.
can't wait to see more of your adventures.
All right. See ya.
You betcha. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Find all of our show notes at allelectricfamily.com/allelectricconversations. Be sure to connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at All Electric Family. Find us on Twitter as All Electric Fam. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to share it and hit that subscribe button. Leave a review and help inspire others to hit the road. Until next time, stay charged.